Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for making it right to the very end of the building. It looks like a fair number of you found us here, so thank you for coming to listen to our story today. I'm Gillian Saunders from Grant Thornton. I'm for Grant Thornton Audit Advisory and Tax Firm. I head up the sector specialization in hospitality and tourism. And today we're going to talk about the future of hotels. Hotels in 2020, what will hotels look like in 2020, with particular emphasis on this all-pervasive impact of digital ICT. Now, I'm told ICT is an old terminology already, so we're just going to call it the digital economy or the internet economy or the digital internet economy or something like that. And I have a quote that I often use when I speak about this of an amazing, I live in South Africa, by the way, an amazing South African who was the sub-Saharan CEO of Google. And he says, what we are going to be living in is an environment in which there's a ubiquitous sensory membrane all around us of federated subsystems, which are just exchanging data, okay? So federated subsystems means it's like co-creation, it's like hacking. It means that the app that you as a hotelier have, somebody else will help create your app. Federated, owned by different people. There's no one ownership. Ubiquitous, it's just there. It's just around us and we understand it and it's there. It creates this intense connectivity in the world. And in fact, he also gave me a quote that I use sometimes that was said by, I think it was, it was one of the top, it was maybe Bill Gates or somebody like that, about these systems and this interconnectivity we have as humans to humans through these systems is actually creating a better humanity, a more connected humanity than the old humanity was. So an anecdote I give for this, when we as hoteliers, we worry about the human touch. And I think the human touch is incredibly important to still have, but the human touch can actually go via technology. So a tale of three 13-year-old girls sitting on a park bench, and their dad sees them talking to each other through this, okay? And he says, why are you being so rude and talking through this when you're next to each other? And I said, Dad, don't be stupid. There are two other girls in this conversation. We would be rude if we spoke. So what we're really saying is they see that as humanity and connectedness, and they don't see it as the not human touch. So I want us to also remember that as hoteliers. You can actually connect with your staff with your guests, and your guests with each other, and you with your guests through this, and it's not necessarily lacking in the human touch. It's just a different way of talking to each other. But anyhow, I'm going to go, with Grant Thornton, we did a study starting in 2014, and we pulled out a number of trends that we saw coming through this all-pervasive impact in our industry. And some of them were talked about yesterday in the plenary sessions. The changing nature of the business models, particularly taking into account things like the sharing economy. The challenge to brands of the entire search engine, distribution channel, OTAs, aggregators, and whether the brand still has relevance or whether the convenience of what you find through those meta search engines is more important. We talked also about the mobile-centric world, and it was spoken about on the platform yesterday. These things are incredibly powerful. Again, I have now two daughters one of them actually turned 20 today, so I no longer have teenagers. But anyhow, 3 years ago at their school, I went to one of those talks to parents about the youth of today, about the millennials, they're millennials. And the gentleman talking was a distinguished prof from an academic institution. He said, this thing's like an extension of their brain. And my children said to me, Mum, yours is like an extension of your brain. You're worse than us. But this thing is, in a way, like an extension of our brain. We connect with other people through it. We connect with our customers. We connect with our suppliers, people we buy and sell from. We connect with information and content. And many people we know, it's the last thing you look at night before you go to bed. And if you haven't looked at it during the night, it's still the first thing you look at in the morning when you get up. And we saw yesterday how often people use these. So this thing is vitally important in this impact and how we as hoteliers use this to communicate, to get content across, to deliver our services to our guests and between our employees and our guests, and even us to our employees. So you may have heard Vivek Badrinath from Accor yesterday talking about how his employees use Yammer to communicate. It's an internal social network for employees. Funnily enough, as an accounting firm, we also use Yammer. We have a global network on Yammer. It's actually got so busy for me between Facebook and Yammer and Twitter, I haven't got time to keep up. But anyhow, it's exciting. So this year we've delved a little more, Grant Thornton, into this space, and we've looked a little bit more at what this one, personalization. So just a few slides on personalization. Because guess what? In hospitality, we've always thought we were about a personal hosting service to a guest. And it's how can you use, and how will you have to use, this all-pervasive digital connectivity that's out there to improve your personal service? And what if you don't do it? So what are guests expecting? This is just a couple of snapshots of what some people think. 9 in 10 hoteliers think guests will expect their stay to be personalized. And personalization isn't, saying, hello, Mr. So-and-so, and getting the name right. It also isn't saying you can choose this type of pillow on your bed. It's knowing before he gets there, and when he walks in the door through whatever version of facial recognition, following by a location on this, that he already wants that pillow, and he's already chosen his room, and he's already got the pillow in the room. So personalization isn't just delivering on request, it's anticipating and knowing the request and having the information at hand to already know your guests so well that you can deliver a personalized experience in your hotel. 41% of travelers would choose a hotel that uses facial recognition technology to identify guests. Interesting, huh? In fact, I wish I had facial recognition technology in my brain, because how many people do I meet that I can't remember their name, but I know them. And these days, by the way, we talked yesterday about artificial intelligence. They are doing things where they're transmitting intelligence from one human being through electronic stimulus into the brain of another human being. I mean, there is crazy stuff going on there. I'm not saying that you're going to put electrodes into all your employees' heads and have a whole little system telling them how to recognize people's faces, but you never know. We actually don't know. There are robotic assistances for human beings doing manual work that makes it easier for them to do manual work now. They wear a sort of one of those things you thought you only saw in science fiction movies on their backs or on their arms, and it helps them actually do things. 74% of consumers get frustrated when websites promote content that has nothing to do with them. What that really means is you have the opportunity to promote content that is exactly what they want to hear about. But if you promote content that is not what they want to hear about because you don't know about them, or you haven't researched their tastes or understood their tastes, you're going to annoy them. Okay? So we mustn't get it wrong. As hoteliers, if we get it wrong, being in the personal service industry, we have the worst possible negative things happening if we get it wrong. Personalization happens, we've put here, I think, 7 steps. It starts when they're even thinking about staying somewhere in a hotel. Okay? And I'm not going to go through all this in detail. It's very important when you're booking. And one of the things I think we don't do at the moment, and by the way, this little report, there's some copies there, and if you leave me cards, I'll send you a digital version of it, but there's some hard copies there with all of this in it, but, and more. So booking, and do you know what I think we're bad at hotels? We're bad at taking information when people book. When people book an airline ticket, you give the system, the online system, more information than we ever do. So what do you want to know about a person? Maybe you want to know their age. Maybe you don't have to make them share this information with you, but maybe you want to know their religion, or maybe you want to know if they're coming with their family, the names of their children. There's all sorts of things you could ask if you wanted to. Virgin Hotels, we quote them in our report, say this. They say they send a questionnaire to their guests. I think that sounds terrible. I don't want to answer questionnaires. So you've got to do it differently. But you can take information from people about their likes and dislikes. You can actually research them on social media. So one of the hotels that we talk about here does that. They pre-research their guests on social media. They get a feel for what their guests like, and they put a themed gift in their room based on what they perceive that person's preferences are. What Virgin tell a story about is they ask people what they want and what they don't want in their minibar in advance so they can stock the minibar. So I would love to be able to tell people I need a really nice cold bottle of Chardonnay every time I arrive in a hotel room, and I want my TV on Sky News because that's what I watch, and a few other things. You just ask, hey, what's your favorite TV channel? And have it on when they check in and they get into their room. So simple, and we don't do all these things. Virgin's little thing that we report in our report was when somebody said, well, I don't want to find a dragon in my minibar. So what did they do? They put a little toy dragon in the minibar for that guy when he arrived. Simple, incredibly powerful, digital economy enabled personalization. So we're creating those touch points that we as hoteliers have felt very important, the human touch point, but we're making them so much more fantastic by using information and collecting information. Joining with the people in the transport and the travel industry to work through the chain to make life easier for people. Maybe, I don't even have to pick up my suitcase off the baggage thing. Maybe you will pick it up for me, take it to my room, and put it in the room that I already chose online before I got on the plane. Who knows? There's things like that. There's nothing wrong with getting involved with the people in the travel chain as well. The room preferences and checking in are still, in South Africa, where we've been able to choose theatre seats by seat online for years and years and years. Airline seats, we choose our seat online. Hotels are only just getting around to letting us choose a hotel room before we check in. I know it's a bit different because the hotel room algorithms of who's checked out, who's arriving at what time, but you know what? We don't ask people what time they're going to arrive either. if we know what time you're going to arrive, or let's say I get off the plane at Berlin-Tegel, my location thing comes on, and the hotel I'm staying at sends me a little click through to their app saying, okay, you've arrived in Berlin, here's your room choices at the moment. Do you want to choose this room, that room? And maybe I can augment the pricing because I choose one that I've got a preference for, that's, I don't know, close to the lift, got a better view. We're way behind on that room preference, room choosing. Checking in, I think checking in the old way is going to go out the window. Lots of hotels are moving towards a type of online check-in. You can then get your room key on this. You point it like you get your boarding pass on this. You just put your boarding pass under the scanner. You put this at your room door, and it opens your door for you. You choose. If you want a porter, you can have a porter. You've told them already. If you don't want a porter, you're just going to sail straight through up to your bedroom with your key already on here. And probably it enables the lift from a security perspective. And around the hotel, food and drink, local attractions, and encouraging your guests to co-create content for you. The videos, the experiences. I was talking about how talking through these things is not necessarily dehuman. And using emojis, emoticons, makes them even more human. So I sometimes think when I talk to my daughters, I've got better conversations on here through using emojis than I would with body language speaking to them face to face. So, just saying. If you use them, you know what I'm talking about. Why don't you have a set? Kim Kardashian's got a set of emojis. Every hotel can have a set of emojis. So that you can already give the guests the little things to tack onto the messages they're sending to their family with the photos they take and the hotel emoji tacked on. You can do lots of things. I mean, the thing about my talk and this is I can just go on and on and on imagining ways you could do things more powerfully. So the entire time they're here, you can connect. And one of the ones I think would be lovely is people are doing tablets for changing, or apps for managing rooms, managing temperature in rooms. We're starting to see managing smell in rooms coming through. We're starting to see in advance changing the room layout. If I'm coming to a hotel on business, I might want a different layout if I'm coming to the hotel for leisure purposes. If I'm coming with 2 kids, I might want a different layout than if I'm coming as a single business person traveling alone. If I'm a 65-year-old business person, maybe I want something different to a 20-year-old business person. You can do such tiny little things to change the experience. But the most important thing is don't forget that after leaving, you're trying to own the guests through this as well. So you want to connect with them forever afterwards. You want them to continue co-creating because the power of the information that people put out there, whether it's on TripAdvisor or their own Facebook page, is incredible. So you need to be open to working with that through them. So that's just the flavor for some of what I think is exciting things. And I've said already, mobile-centric. And the thing that we need to, as hoteliers, understand is we have a lot of data. We can collect more, and we have a lot already, because the guest checkout folio is full of a lot of information about what the guest did. If you've got sensors in the room to track what happened in the room, you've got a lot of information about what the guest did. It's collecting it in a mineable way, and then mining it, and then acting on it. Not necessarily easy. So first of all, you've got to collect it properly. Then you've got to be able to do the data analysis, and then you've got to be able to act on your data analysis. Different skill sets, all sorts of implications for R&D, for independent hotels partnering with suppliers and ICT suppliers. Sorry, I'm not supposed to say ICT, it's an old word. And I haven't put it here, I don't think in any way this takes away what we are as hosts in the industry and the personal touch, and we mustn't be worried that it dehumanizes. You've got to still have the human element. Sometimes, a busy business person is quite happy to have a very efficient, non-human service, perhaps on check-in and getting to their room. But when they want a beer at the end of the day, I'm not sure they want a robot behind the bar to serve them. So you've got to understand your customers and in which market segments the touch points are important that it's a human touch point, and in which market segments and at what times the cyber-enabled touch points or the pure technical touch points can work. So leading the way, I think I've probably talked too long, and I've got an amazing panel here of people. All of this is in the report. There's some little examples of different hotels, what they're doing. I talked about some of them already. But we've got one quote here: you must be guest-centric, and you should be providing a service to one person which is absolutely relevant to that person, but may not be relevant to someone else. So I guess that personifies personalization, the quote. So again, this is some examples of apps and control through apps, room service. I mean, sometimes, have you sat in a hotel lobby and you've been waiting to find somebody you can wave at and get a coffee? Just have an app that's connecting me at any time. And the app doesn't have to, you don't have to say, I'm sitting in the lobby, because there's a geolocator on the cell phone. It knows where you are when you tell the person, can I please have 2 more coffees, because I'm sitting in your lobby. Simple things. This Apple IBM app, and I think there are other ones out there in terms of websites, connects business travelers with each other. So if I'm coming as a single person to Berlin as a business traveler, it might give me a little bunch of people that I could hook up with. That sounds terrible. Get to know and perhaps travel with or eat in the restaurant with, different things like that. So it's some interesting little excerpts. So I guess that's what I've messaged from our research now. There is lots and lots of different ways that this incredibly powerful internet digital economy can in fact influence the hotel industry, but delivering a personal service through every step of the customer journey is one. And you have a lot of power there if you start to get the information in and you use the technology to deliver. And I think when the brands say they need to compete, this is where sometimes brand power can work in terms of personalizing and being known for the different types of personal service you offer. So that's my little intro. I have an amazing panel today, all of them in different ways maximizing and leveraging the opportunities in the digital environment out there. So without further ado, we're going to let everybody give about a 5 minutes presentation as well, and then we'll have a panel discussion and we'll open it to the floor. So first I've got Michael Levy sitting next to me from Citizen M Hotels. As I understand it, the M stands for mobile, as in people being mobile. I'm not sure if it was a play on words with this when you guys started or not. No. But I think it's become that in some people's minds. So Michael is the... I've forgotten what you are now, sorry.
But it's not important.
It's not important. I'm sure it's very important. You have a title.
I'm in charge of operations.
Charge of operations for Citizen M. Over to you, Michael, and you've got a presentation. Let me get it up for you.
Yes. What I wanted to show is that all these great opportunities, and of course these are a couple of items that Gillian showed that are applicable maybe to the hospitality industry. But when you're in the hospitality industry yourself, you realize that we are sitting stuck in a lot of legacy systems. We are trying to keep day-to-day everything running, and our technology not necessarily provides us a great stepping stone to provide all this. And the traveling guests, in our case mobile citizens, are getting more and more demanding. So they definitely, in their own lifestyle, are getting accustomed to all kinds of niceties. And whether there are these niceties, there's plenty of other things that people are using as they travel the world and as they navigate or communicate with each other. It is ever more important to understand this digital space. And what we looked at from the digital space point of view, there's really hotel systems whereby we have hardware wired, if you wish, hotel systems and software systems that provide the technology and the communication between all. And there's obviously the whole distribution landscape. And they're all, basically grouped together in technology or in the digital space, but they're very distinct pockets. And what we found is you need to become more knowledgeable. And if you look at the new age companies that are extremely successful and do well with the guest, they all understand data much better than we do. So I couldn't agree more with what Gillian showed us, but many hoteliers are pulling out their hair and saying, okay, how am I going to do that? So what I want to do is show you a couple of items. So this is a slide that, without going into much detail, current hotel architecture looks very much like this. On the left side, you have a hotel system, a PMS that sits at the center, and anybody and everybody needs to interface to that baby. And sometimes it's easy to hook up, but most of the time it's very difficult to hook up. We pay for interfaces, they need to be maintained, and they're never maintained. So we have a lot of problem and instability just to bring the first step forward. And if you look on the right-hand side, you see, that we're getting better with hotel technology. So in-room tablets, we have domotica that can be basically managed simpler today. And we automate everything, but we need room controllers for that. We need networks for that. We as hoteliers have really no clue how to handle all that, trust me. And this interface spaghetti, unfortunately, does not allow us, because all the data that we need in order to serve up these niceties to the guests sits in 1,000 different pockets. And if somebody says, yeah, but you have a CRM, mostly the CRMs, and I don't want to knock them all, but I think they're good CRMs, but mostly CRMs, I call them birthday card machines, because that's really what we use them for in our industry. But really understanding data, really understanding our guests, we don't. So today is available in the industry whereby instead of interface spaghetti where everybody communicates with each other, you do that through a service bus. And basically every application communicates through a standard API into a service bus, and what the bus does is nothing more, nothing less than pick up all the messages and deliver it to the other. So nobody talks with each other anymore. So all of a sudden legacy systems, as long as there's a standard API that can work into a service bus, you get the opportunity to have everybody communicate with each other. We're switching over our POS in the hotels, and we're not informing the PMS that we're changing the POS out. That's unheard of in our industry, but through the service bus possible. Also, you see on the left-hand side dashboard. So if all your data goes through one pipe, all of a sudden you get the ability to put a dashboard on it and be ahead of the guest and know and understand what's going on and use that real data in order not to guess what your guest wants or get other studies that people tell you what your guest wants, but to really know how it is applicable for you. And how that looks is, in our case, we have on the right-hand side a local service bus that is in the hotel installed. And why do you do it local? Because the response times are incredible at that time. If you do it all in the cloud, then you have to work with too much caching and you have possibly a delay. Whereas we have all our systems in the cloud and the two service buses communicate as one. And there's a very efficient way. So there's a company called IHIF that has helped us create this on a Windows Azure standard service bus. And we have installed it in our hotels, complete stability as far as communications and systems integration goes, and we see all our data. And what we even have done is we have taken all our guest data and dumped it into Salesforce because we wanted to mine it in a different way and understand more. So it gives you a lot of opportunities. I'm just showing it to you as a suggestion. So here you see an example of that dashboard, and basically it is per hotel a little view and gives you some standard information. But if you go deeper into, this is per room information through the room switch that we can see whether the tablet is working, whether the HVAC systems are up and running, the Wi-Fi is up and running, the digital TV, everything is managed through this one thing. So we can now all of a sudden really provide that guest service. So talking about temperature checking into your room, for us it will be very easy to know what temperature Gillian wants her room at, and when she arrived at the hotel to pick a room for her that is at that temperature when she walks in. So it provides you with different opportunities. So this is sort of the backbone to all those opportunities. The second area that I think, and we will be talking with the panel as we move further right for you, about the distribution game. And I think that the corporate contract is maybe a historic moment that we should frame them, the ones that we have today, and in a couple of years say, yeah, we used to work with those. I think that segmentation is changing rapidly, and people understand that they need to, as stockbrokers, sell their inventory online. If not, others are going to do that for us. And I think that we don't have tools. So we have all the data, but all the data sits everywhere. So what we have done with Snapshot is brought all the data together. And it's not necessarily that we bring new data together, we just aggregate data in real time. So any stockbroker in the world has a data screen that they make their decisions from as they trade. So we now have that trading possibility as well and are able to dice and slice that data as we want to see. So all of a sudden, the people that you have are not reservations or reservation supervisors anymore, but they start to migrate to data analysts and people that really know how to deal with that information. But there's more, because there's a lot of stuff happening from outside. We need to understand the search engine optimization, competitor pricing and tracking, which we do with OTA Insight, or use the back end of an OTA and really get data out of the internet that they provide you with. It is huge and incredible data. Or be able on your own website to start mentioning, and it's a little small as it came out, but this is for our hotel in Paris, and we mentioned the pricing for the particular nights that are requested of the competitive hotels next to us. No need to go to a data aggregator anymore. You can see it with us, or if you wanted to see it from different data aggregators, we're happy to provide that information as well. We even go as far, and I just want to introduce it as that if you go into the digital space, it's a whole new space that you need to learn. The guy that runs our website is a data analyst. And we have systems and tools like this one up here with swimming lanes that basically tracks guests as you get onto the website and you see their behavior and you can communicate or opt things into it. It's not revolutionary. A lot of other industries are using it much better than we do. In the hotel space, we as hoteliers, and I'm one, I can say it, we are not that tech savvy. And we're not that good at all these systems. And if we do not get better at it, then other people will know our guests better than we do. Other people will be able to provide services to our guests better than we do. And it used to be when you traveled that you were staying at the hotel because it was aspirational and you learned something. Today, that's not the case anymore. So let's turn it around and become tech savvy. Thank you.
Michael, thanks very much. So that's the Chief Operating Officer of a hotel talking tech in a big way and talking about having data analysts managing or running the website. So, and giving you, I think, a flavor for some of the ways that we can work with the digital economy to really change hotels. So now we've got somebody from the channel, Skyscanner. We've got Nikhil, who is the Director of Hotels and Car Hire for Skyscanner. I must have been a bit ignorant. I thought Skyscanner was predominantly airlines, but he'll tell us a little bit about Skyscanner, effectively how they operate in the channel. And I thought it was very interesting to hear from Michael how he's actually taking the channel information and putting it on his website to almost like back end and take the power out of their sails, if you want to call it that, or the wind out of their sails. But Nikhil, tell us a little bit about Skyscanner and what you think.
Thanks, Gillian. I lead Skyscanner's hotel business. The business right now, Skyscanner is about a 12-year-old company, but I operate my business as a startup within Skyscanner. I've got a big development team based out of Barcelona and Edinburgh. I mean, personally, I'm a career hotelier like a lot of you in this room, having worked with IHG, Fairmont, Wyndham as an employee and also as an owner of hotels before I moved across to Skyscanner a little over 3 years ago. Skyscanner, for those who don't know Skyscanner, is predominantly, as Gillian said, is a flight search company. But we are actually one of the largest travel search companies in the world. We get close to 60 million visitors per month. We have 40 million app downloads. And I think our users love us. So more than 50% of our users come back to us after making a search on Skyscanner. We are truly global. Even though we're a Scottish company, only 20% of our traffic comes from the UK. Our second biggest market is Russia, and our third biggest market is Australia. So as you can see, it's very, our traffic comes from across the world. Unlike other meta search companies out there, we're completely independent, we're privately owned, and so we're not influenced by a major OTA partner who wants us to drive traffic to their site, or not influenced by venture capitalist partners who want us to do certain things that goes against what our users would like. We are very, very user-centric. We make decisions that go completely anti what a normal business would run. So we, for example, our two biggest partners are Ryanair and EasyJet from a flight perspective. We don't make any money off Ryanair and EasyJet. We drive close to 5% of Ryanair's traffic, and we don't monetize that at all because we believe that our users want to come and book Ryanair flights to us, and at some other time they'll come and book a first-class British Airways flight. So it's a bit of a loss leader. So that is in a nutshell in terms of what Skyscanner is. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nikhil. Very interesting. It'd be very interesting to get some stats on the hotel component of your visits and bookings and things like that if you have them. But if we move on now to Jerome. Jerome is with that, I don't know if it's a dirty word at IHIF, but Airbnb, which comes up all the time as the disruptor in our industry. Is it something to fear? Is it something to embrace? What do they think about this space, and what do they think about the hotel industry vis-a-vis the sharing economy that they're acting in? And Jerome, over to you to tell us a bit about Airbnb.
Sure. Airbnb as a company was founded 2008, San Francisco. So the founding story is actually pretty self-explanatory about what we are about. It goes that two of our founders, who were designers, wanted to be entrepreneurs. They had a hard time paying their rent, and in order to pay their rent at the end of the month, during a big conference, they acquired 3 airbeds. They put it into their living room and created a little website around it. And that little website was called Airbed and Breakfast, and that's how the initial very first page started. So that's still ingrained, that personalized service, that unique kind of accommodation is still ingrained in everything we do. It's still very much part of our DNA, but obviously the offering has changed quite a bit. So 2011, we started international expansion. We started to think about, we wanted to be a global company. We're operating in a global industry, so we wanted to be a global company. And we opened up several offices in order to be closer to where all of the transactions happen. So we have 22 offices across the globe at the moment. And we are, even though we're an American company, we are mainly European business. So we're about 52% of all of our transactions happen in Europe. And our fastest growing region is actually Asia. So we're investing quite a lot in Asia because we want it to be that global brand. We're operating in a global economy. So at the moment, in terms of size, we have about 2 million listings on our platform. We're operating in 191 countries, 34,000 cities, and more than 75 million people have traveled with us. Of the 75 million people, about half of them was just in the last 12 months. So it's been a very significant size, and it's grown tremendously in the last, I would say, 3 years. And our claim, the claim of Airbnb, is we want everybody to belong anywhere. No matter where you go, no matter where you travel, we want you to feel at home. And that's a little bit our vision, that's a little bit where we're going. So through personalized and unique accommodation, through that human touch, we want to try to achieve that. We're also part, and I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, part of the collaborative consumption. And that's a big shift, right? It's a big shift in terms of our economic models, in terms of all the paradigms we're used to, going a little bit from a B2C environment where there are very few businesses that are producers of services, of products, selling to all the rest of us who are consumers. Platforms like Airbnb, and it's happening across the different industries, platforms like Airbnb allow you to monetize assets that are already available, and basically enabling and empowering all of our community, all of the users, and giving them a window to the world where they can offer their services, their product. So that's a little bit in a nutshell what Airbnb is and the collaborative consumption that we're operating in.
And how important would you say use of the internet economy is to the Airbnb?
I think it's vital for us. Obviously, without the internet, we weren't able to provide the platform. And the platform we've enabled is not a platform that is optimized for transaction, but it's a platform that is optimized for trust. And trust for two people to connect is really what we created. Without the databases that are able to handle millions of transactions every day, without the social networks that are able to authenticate users and making sure that who you say you are, you really are that person, and without mobile being able to help you out while you're on the go, a platform like Airbnb would have not happened. So I think it's one of the pillars of what we are about, and it's actually at the base of who we are.
Super. Thanks very much, Jerome. And then our last panelist is Greg Marsh, co-founder and chief executive of One Fine Stay. I've got a presentation or a video that I'm going to try and get to run. I'm seeing if I can do this. No, that's not the video. It's here. Excuse me, you see, I'm supposed to be tech savvy, but somehow or other, the video's at the back here. There we go. All the stuff's in front of it. I presume we've got sound as well. Okay, but it's not at the beginning. Let me try and get to the beginning. Where's it? Usually you click it, you get, yeah. Thank you. There we go.
My head is full of dreams. I've seen a million things. And when I go to sleep, the sheep are counting me. I made a marching band from spoons and old tin cans. When we go down the street, gotta move and stomp your feet. Oh, 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 oh.
I want to go stay there.
There we go. Exactly. Please do. The first thing I should say is congratulations. I feel like you guys cracked the code because you managed to get to the most obscure room in the panel with the most obscure title, and it's still standing room only. So clearly, we all figured it out. So One Fine Day, we've been going since 2010. We're a business that I think in some ways sits halfway between a pure play web platform and a traditional hospitality company. We manage the private homes which sit in the parts of town where you'd love to stay if you could, and owned by people who actually travel a lot, because if you can travel, you do travel. But those homes tend to be owned by people who on the margin have limited incentive to run what is effectively a luxury hospitality business in their spare time. So the typical One Fine Stay property is a multi-million-pound property, a multi-million-dollar property, typically situated in the center of a major city. We operate today in London, Paris, New York, Los Angeles, just about to launch in Rome, and several other locations. And behind the scenes, One Fine Stay effectively operates like a hospitality organization. We have about 700 people across the markets where we operate, providing all the kind of hospitality management services illustrated in the video that you would expect in a hotel like this, but provided in what is essentially an archipelago of private homes available when their owners are traveling. Our business, it's interesting that Gillian started the conversation talking about mobile technology. Our business literally couldn't exist without small screen devices in the pocket. And that's not just because we make the iPhone available to guests when they stay with us. It's actually because the way that we manage our field service teams is almost entirely through these small devices. It's a little like the way that, if it's not controversial to use the Uber example in Berlin, it's a little like the way that an Uber driver is directed around the city and is effectively steering their work pattern and plan through a small screen device. So similarly, our field services teams are being directed and managed through their interactions with our One Fine Stay apps. And that's effectively how we manage the complexity of seasonality, the variability of movements and logistics and services behind the scenes to provide a consistent hospitality experience in that private home setting. So from my perspective, I think one of the most interesting features of, let's call it sort of the emerging set of services that new entrants into the hospitality space are offering is firstly that there's nothing new under the sun. What we're doing is no different from what every luxury hotel does. We're doing it in an unfamiliar environment, which involves some innovation around how you deliver that service and how you ensure it's delivered consistently. But we're delivering it in a very familiar pattern. It's people talking to people, as Gillian said, and other panelists have touched on. It's about the quality of empathy and the care that you feel when you arrive and when you check in. Of course, it's also about the accommodation itself. The typical One Fine Stay property, we accept fewer than 1 in 10 of the properties that we evaluate for inclusion in our exclusive portfolio, and that's to maintain those quality standards and service standards. And again, there's nothing new under the sun. People have always been willing to pay a premium for a branded service and a branded hospitality experience. So yes, there's novelty and there's innovation. There's novelty around distribution, selection, and purchase, and there's novelty around some aspects of how it's delivered. But there's nothing new under the sun. So if you are planning a trip to London or New York, it'd be a pleasure to have you stay with us.
And how much might it cost?
The typical, a typical nightly rate somewhere in the region of $600 or $700 a night.
Okay. Very competitive. Thanks very much. And I think, we've seen amazing examples here. We've got 2 people operating in the sharing economy where the technology and the internet and the digital is what's really enabled them to hone the product. And I think, Greg, yours is also, I think, this trust that's built in there. Giving your home to a stranger must be quite a degree of trust you need in the system. And so that building of trust through using the ICT or using the environment and the internet is incredibly important to those 2 products. And hoteliers, we can also use the trust in that environment in a different way to build the trust in our brands, I think, when you look at the hotels and go back to the hotels. We've already taken up a lot of your time. I had some chats with the panelists on email and beforehand. I want to ask Nikhil one thing quickly. You talked about Google making a big move and what could change if Google really said, hang on, we want to get into this hospitality and tourism space. What was your thoughts there?
So I think Google's purpose of existence is to consolidate the world's information or the world's data. Now, if and only if Google did make a big move into travel, I do think they'll make an impact, not only to other internet economy companies, but also to hotels and businesses, because they'll become the sole distributor of your inventory. However, the big question is if they can do it. I do believe that the internet minus Google is still bigger than Google itself. So you've got the existence of companies like Amazon, the Apple App Stores, that have been able to create a niche for themselves in the internet economy. So yes, Google is a formidable player. They haven't really made a big move into travel. If they do, it will impact all of us over here. And even if they do, how well do they do it is going to be really important. They made a few moves here and there, but not been entirely successful, especially with the user experience on the flight finder and the hotel finder and stuff like that. But if they do it right, we've got to be careful. However, if they do it right is the big question.
And also, isn't the power of Google, if they do it right, something that we have to, somehow or other, the regulatory compliance environment, the antitrust type stuff would have to come and look at that in some way or other?
I think that's important.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, the biggest advertisers are suppliers. So for example, between Priceline and Expedia, that's 3.5–4% of their revenues. And also, travel itself is about 30%. I mean, it's said that it's about 30% of Google's overall revenue. So they've got to be very careful on how they play that game.
Okay. Jerome, Airbnb. Why do the hoteliers scared of you? I'm saying that. What is your competitive edge, and why should that scare hoteliers, or shouldn't it?
Why are hoteliers scared of us? I think, first of all, that they're two different, and I'm not the only one saying this, but there's two different experiences. So sometimes I even stay at hotels simply because it's more convenient. And sometimes I prefer, especially when I'm traveling with my family or when I have a longer stay, I prefer to stay at home. So depends on the timing, depends on the person, it depends on the occasion. What I think sets us apart from the scalability and the investment that you have to do in real estate, is on the one hand is the people. I think we talked about it in the past, and the unique accommodation, right? Platforms like Airbnb are able to provide 100% personalized service. We talked about it in the intro. That is something that is extremely powerful. What we're good at so far is matching up our guests with a specific type of accommodation. And even that we can improve, and we need to improve on quite significantly. What we still have to develop much further, and we need big data, we need much of the data points that you touched on before in order to do so, is matching up people to people, is guest to host, and depending on the profiles, having interesting people meet each other. So
do you get repeat visitation? Does the same person go back to the same Airbnb in the same way as a hotel wants to link into the guest, so each time they come, they stay?
I think we have less of that.
Yeah.
So as you go into obviously the business travel entities and so on,
And
you
are
have
you getting
much
a lot
more
of business travel? What percentage might be business travel in Airbnb?
Business travel is still a big minority of our stay. So it's mainly leisure at the moment, but we are doing. It's a huge space, so we're investing resources in order to grow that. But that's where you would have more repeat, and being a leisure, it's more about being a global company. That's where having a global footprint sets you apart and allows you actually to have that repeat kind of offering.
But as you say, you're investing to target the business market, to tailor for it. Okay, very interesting.
I think sorry,
Yeah.
hoteliers do need to be concerned, and you didn't really answer that question, because if you think about it, right now Airbnb is valued at more than what Wyndham Hotels is valued as a company. They've got 2 million listings, like you'd said, and in 2014 there were 1 million room nights sold in New York City through Airbnb, which would have gone to a hotelier. So I do think the Airbnb phenomena and other companies like Airbnb will have an impact for the developers over here in terms of feasibility studies you do, and also valuations on your properties. So I think it's a big impact.
Just to act on that, so I think there's an overlap for sure. I do think that it's not a zero-sum game. I think there's people who used to be able not to travel, whether it's for convenience, whether it's for price, whatever, to a specific destination, are now able to do so. So I think we need to partner with destination in order to make the destinations bigger. And then again, and you take a look at some of our biggest destinations, whether it's a Barcelona, Paris, a London, or in New York, the occupation, the room rates, the RevPARs and so on are through the roofs, right? So are growing, and those are the cities where we've grown the most. So I think there's definitely an overlap, but I still stick with the idea that they're complementary services and it's not a zero-sum game.
Okay. Greg, do you compete with Airbnb, and do you have any business? Is it all leisure?
There's a fair proportion of business travel, though our sweet spot's leisure travel for precisely the reasons that's clear, I think, from the video, which is that if you're traveling in a larger group with a family or as a couple seeking an experience of a city stay, it's a more natural fit for a leisure set of needs. And I think Jeroen's point about the quintessential or the primacy of convenience for business travel. I mean, really, business travelers' needs are quite distinct from leisure traveler needs. And although some hotel brands equally serve both sets of needs, you know, the best screwdriver is not the one you find on your Swiss Army knife. I think in terms of this complementarity point, our typical length of stay is, I mean, it's over 5 nights, depends on the market, but it's a longer stay. And again, that's a market which most city centre hotels poorly serve. I don't want to claim that there is no competitive interference, but I think that the reality is both our price point and the service promise differentiate us pretty significantly in the market on the guest side, and I also think that the need set that we're fulfilling for guests to travel is, as I say, poorly served by traditional hotel product in city centres. So it's not a zero-sum game. Having said that, I do think we're seeing displacement. I think we're bringing back to city centres families who alternatively might not stay in cities at all. They might stay in resort locations, or they might stay in vacation rentals outside urban areas. Finally, there is an expanding pie here. I don't want to claim that, you know, the growth of some of the companies on the panel here has not come to some extent at the cost of other competitors. I mean, clearly some of this is market share capture. But there's also a growing pie, which is that as the cost of certain services comes down, or the comfort that people experience in certain travel types increases, you are seeing more travel take place. And that's one of the reasons you're seeing global growth in the travel sector.
Thanks. Michael, Citizen M Hotel Group, are you concerned about the competition from the sharing economy Airbnbs? Are you going to embrace it in some way or other? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Well, what is to make a more general statement on from a hotelier's point of view? Here are all companies that are extremely keen on understanding their guest and providing a service to their guest that matches 100% smack on with their needs. And in hoteliers, we're building hotels and we're letting everybody in, and we hope that somewhere sticks. And we do not know necessarily very well what is happening with our guests, and we have given that out of hand. So I think whether it is the sharing economy, whether it is consolidator sites, OTAs, whatever it is, we basically have, the only thing we have is our inventory. We decide where our inventory goes. But since we don't understand our guests, we don't have data, we don't have the systems to hook ourselves up, we have no intelligence, and we definitely don't have people that understand what's going on. We're always worried about the foie gras and the Grand Cru and the chien de rôtisseur. I mean, let's face it. So what we need to do is get far more tech savvy, and we need to understand what this digital age is going to do. And unless we do that, other people are going to run with other opportunities. And I think that, yes, maybe the pie is growing, but I think it's definitely eating in somewhere to the hospitality or the hotel space. So somewhere it's going to hit us all, somewhere it is going to bite us. And if it's not directly, it's indirectly, others being, suffering. And what I think, especially at an investment conference where we're here today, we need to understand that the underlying asset needs to basically live on the business that's coming through. If we as hoteliers have not a good grip on that and don't understand digitally enough of our own guest, then the assets are at risk. And I would say that for that, you need to change business processes. So all these new economy organizations have changed business processes significantly. And we sort of hang on because of all kinds of excuses with technology or cost associated or whatever it is. Pretty soon we're going to have all a Kodak moment, and we see that basically it has gone by. So changing business processes, understanding that the plumbing and hooking up the systems correctly so you can get your data out is a must. It's not a choice. Migrating to that is not as costly as you think, and you can stay with a lot of your legacy systems, yet get the information and the data. And I think that if you do not get savvy on your distribution, yeah, then keep on looking at these guys. They will become very successful, and I applaud them for what they're doing because they're great, smart companies, and I use them gladly myself too.
Fantastic. Time is flying by, so it's time for you guys to ask some questions. Okay, here's the first hand eager question. There's a fin.
Okay, well, I guess I can speak without a microphone. Yes, I have a question for Jerome.
Do you want to say who you are as well? Maybe
Yeah,
introduce.
sorry.
Thanks. Sorry.
Macy Marvel from Opus Hospitality in Geneva. I'm a journalist here, actually representing Mintel International. I have a question for Jerome. It's interesting to see that Roommate is present, I believe, for the first time in this conference. I guess you're familiar with their business model a bit, with the
Roommate.
hotel services for rental apartments. I'd like to have your comment on the future for this kind of structure as a way to marry the hotel business with the so-called sharing economy. And as a follow-up, maybe Greg could also comment on the IHIF cooperation that I believe you have going, right? Well, they took a stake in you, right?
Yeah. So I think Kike Sarasola with Roommate is actually trying to do the right thing. It's taking a look and understanding what customers that are using Airbnb or some of the other platforms are looking for, using the data that we were mentioning before in order to leverage that and offering a service. So he's acting on something that is, I think, across the board, something that we all acknowledge that is going to stay and that people are looking for. So whether or not he has the right business model, I think I'm the wrong person to judge, but I definitely think there's ways how we can collaborate and use some of the fixed cost services that hotels have and spread that across a bigger base. For example, with service departments, similar kind of deal that Greg was mentioning before. So I definitely think it's that he's following his instinct and his vision. It's the way to go. And I think there's a good collaboration and big synergies between an established hotel brand and a much more variable kind of growth appeal by private accommodations.
So do you think other brands will get into this?
Oh, we were already seeing it, right? And I think you can comment on, for example, the Hyatt investment, but we're already seeing that some of the hotel brands are starting to invest in whether it's platforms or whether it's building their own brands.
I would just add, our experience has been that and this picks up Michael's point, that the amount of fundamental kind of business process re-engineering and deep service engineering that you need to do to be able to service apartment or long tail inventory, it's hard. It's a very different operating platform, a very different operating model, and the traditional technology systems and PMS systems don't support that in a straightforward way. So yes, I do think there'll be hybrid models emerging. I think it's a non-trivial problem. It's not just a sort of plug and play that you just connect two different types of business together. We announced a financing round, just to answer your question directly, we announced a financing round a few months ago, and Hyatt Corporation was one of the investors in our business. More generally, I'd say we do not perceive that the business we're in is a direct competitor of luxury hospitality products in city centres. We think it's much more complementary than competitive, and we've therefore been very open to and remain open to finding the right partnerships. And we hope that there'll be lots more to announce on that front over the next few weeks and months.
Just a last follow-up, and then I'll go quiet. But I think one of the challenges that we have is where do you draw the balance between a streamlined process environment and a unique kind of environment, right? So we've grown from a business that everything was unique, and it's up to a point where new people start to use Airbnb that have never used it before, start to question, do I need to bring my towels? Do I need to bring my bed linen? And so on and so on. So at some moment in time, you need to standardize it somewhat, but you also can't go all the way because then you lose that competitive edge that people are actually looking for when they book Airbnb. So it's a very delicate balance that you have to find between the two experiences.
There's a question at the back there, and then this gentleman, and then that gentleman, and then we might have run out of time. So you go.
Real quick question for Jerome on market growth. I was interested to hear you said Europe and Asia. What about North America? And maybe you could just comment on the dynamics of where your model will grow quickest and where it has barriers to grow.
So did everybody hear the question? The question was about market growth and so on. So yeah, I did say that we're an American business. It was founded in the US. At the moment, we are a mainly European business. So it's about 52% of our business is both in origin as well as in destination, about the same size, is happening in Europe. A lot of it is in the domestic markets and so on. Asia is an extremely growing market. The pie is getting bigger. Obviously, it's huge potential, especially in terms of outbound from China and then Indonesian and a very interesting market, Japan and India. Those are the markets that we're focusing on. North America is a rather mature market for us. So the growth rates are still pretty good, but not compared to some of the other regions. And then Latin America is a market where, due to cultural differences and safety concerns, like historic safety concerns, that is a market that we have a harder time penetrating. So it's going to take a little bit more time for some of the social cultural things that have led us to have these safety concerns to edge away.
So is it the maturity of hotel brands that's the barrier in North America?
No, like I said, I think
Saturation.
like I said, I think we're complementary. So I don't think it's because it's a much more matured and consolidated market in terms of hotel brands that is allowing us to grow. I think it's just a matter of market size and penetration compared to Europe, where we've entered in 2011 versus 2008 in the US. So I think it's just a catch-up game that we're playing.
Thanks. Jen?
Hi, Chris Choa from AECOM. I think all the panelists have talked a little bit, or actually quite a bit, about the changing business models that are out there. Are there any things that you look for in terms of the regulatory environment or data partner that you would like to see that would help your businesses grow?
Interesting. Anybody want to take that one?
I can talk a little bit about regulatory environment. I think that's a hot topic. And it's fully logical, right? So due to the size that we have, we are the very first entity that's interested to have clearly established rules of the game, if the rules of the game make sense. And that's a big if. And we're spending quite a significant amount of resources of my time on specifically that. So, and I can understand that for some of the regulators, some of the city halls, some of the regional, national governments, it's a very daunting time, because the paradigm shift that I was explaining before, everything is based on that. So we're going from a movement where either you're a professional or you're a consumer, you're a B or a C. We're going away from that. We're going to an environment where you can be both at the same time, or you can be one and then the next minute you can be another one. So all of that and everything that is ingrained by that is not just a very easy discussion that we have with tourism officials, but it goes into tax debates, into zoning laws, into a lot of the debates. So that's part of the question: why is it so hard to come up with a streamlined regulation? But we're spending significant amount of time on that, and whenever we talk with regulators, whether it's in the Amsterdams, whether it's in the Paris, the Londons of the world, we see the more we talk and the better conversation we have, the more we mature that. We don't have all the answers, but I do think that it's important that there is a discussion so that we can come up with the rules of the game.
I think another hot topic that gets discussed a lot right now is price parity, and the regulations that go behind price parity. I think that's going to be an interesting picture going forward, because you've got certain countries that have ruled that you're not allowed, OTAs and hoteliers are not allowed to have the contracts that explicitly talk about price parity. From a meta search perspective, that works well for us, because for us we compare prices and give prices. And I think for travelers, guests, users as well, you need to be able to show them the best possible price that they get for the same room. So that's going to be an interesting area to see how that kind of pans out over the next year, 2 years.
The other big regulatory thing that we need to all pay cognizance to is the data privacy laws that are coming in different countries, or the different data privacy laws that are already there. And I don't think it's a long debate at the moment, but that's one of the things in terms of cybersecurity that the hoteliers will have to look at with all this personal information. And it's the difference between credit cards and bank accounts versus what wine you like. And it's also possibly the difference between when a person comes to stay in a hotel, with his girlfriend, he may not want you to know that it's his girlfriend. So, you know, it's what are you sharing and what are you not sharing? How do you manage it from the guest expectation side? And how do you work with the regulatory environment that's coming through on data privacy? That's going to be a big thing. We're going to take one last question. So the gentleman had his hand up. And we're officially out of time, so we're going to have to cover a little quick roundup from everybody. But so.
My name is René Bosnia. I work for the City of Amsterdam. I just wanted to react on the question about D-Made, because I don't agree at all that it's here to stay and that it's innovative. Because basically, if you look at D-Made, I only see illegal hotels on D-Made. So I don't really understand why everybody's so enthusiastic about these initiatives, because basically it's not innovative. We've had illegal hotels for ages in Amsterdam. It's just another way to sell an illegal hotel.
Okay, well, there we get to the regulatory environment again, and what's legal and what's not, you know, what is illegal, what's not legal, and that some cities are changing zoning laws and things to help facilitate the sharing economy. But I think we won't have the long debate. We hear your point of view.
In Amsterdam, we have the sharing economy also, but
Yeah.
a little different one, right?
Yeah. If you've got a 30-second last comment, each of you, or anything you want to share with the audience, Michael?
No, I think that we've looked at digital from different angles, and I think that data is king. That has become clear, and there's very smart, savvy companies that know how to take advantage of that changing or has changed environment out there. And I think that we, as an industry, look at it how it affects our hotels or our assets. Maybe we should look a little bit broader and see what digital has done already way beyond our industry and what it continues to do. And hurry up and catch up. Otherwise, we have a serious problem.
Thanks. Nick?
Pretty similar to what Michael said. Hotels need to adapt to this changing distribution landscape. If you don't, you'll get taken over. I think the other thing that we need to also be conscious of is it's not only adapting, but also to look at how do you innovate your product from being a pure hospitality bedroom that you're providing users, but looking at actually the model that Roommate has gone into, and maybe even an independent hotel can invest in 3 apartments by the hotel and actually look at that as, you know, bifurcation of their business model. So adapting and innovation is going to be really important.
Jerome?
I have 2 points. The first one is I'd like to make a big difference between data and information, and that's a big bridge to build. So we all have tons of data, but very few of us have the information that we need in order to make data-driven decisions. So that's one. And the second one is as we're moving from, I'm going to say for the 3rd time, from a B2C environment to a peer-to-peer movement, we see that the traditional brands, and one of the topics that as you introed the session, was talking about brands, we are moving from brands to a much more reputation kind of economy. So reputation is going to be just like brands were in the last century kind of economy. You're able to monetize, they provide you the guarantees and so on. That's what the future is going to be.
Thanks. Greg? One last.
So yeah, I mean, I have no profound words of wisdom except to thank everyone for finding the most obscure committee room. This is where you heard it first. This is where the future started. So thank you.
Thanks very much, everybody. I think the panel really, the message is stuff is happening, and if we don't, as hoteliers, take action to understand our guests using the power of information through collecting data, through mobile, we're going to get left behind. And I think if we don't watch it, the people in the transport channel, like the airlines, will own the guest. And all the OTAs will own the guest. And you will become a commodity added onto what they're selling and their management of the guest and the journey and owning their preferences. So hotels need to act. That's the message. Thank you very much. I think a wonderful round of applause for the panel, please.